Alan was tired, far too tired to be dealing with all this. Hair a mess and thin like straw scattered across the floor of a barn, and a bad case of raccoon eyes. His wired features were lit up only by the faint green glow of his dashboard light. 3:40 a.m., Sunday morning, and for some god-awful reason he was speeding in his little Volvo down an empty, snowy highway. Between the drags of a cigarette, Alan muttered obscenities under his breath, both to express his dismay at having his weekend interrupted like this, as well as to stay awake. Not 30 minutes ago, Alan had been well placed amongst warm, entangling blankets and pillows, so maternal in their envelopment he might as well have been rocked to sleep. While blissfully deep into what was perhaps the third or fourth REM cycle of the night, Alan had been violently sucked away from his Sunday slumbers in the nightly whale song ambience that filled his apartment by the sudden addition of his boss's aggravated voice. Alan worked in gas, mains, industrial, suburban systems, some very new technologies emerging in the slowly dying industry. When there's a problem at one of the stations, it's the duty of the men who are left on call for those nights to go on and fix it. So when the raging and frantic voice of Alan's boss came blasting over the answering machine, Alan was particularly shocked because this was Sunday, and Alan was not on call. No, in Alan's words, some young, lush fuck Isaacs something or other was. Yet, when system errors and blaring lights went off at the monitoring station, indicating what could be a potentially dangerous and, more importantly, expensive problem, and they could neither get a hold of Isaac or radio into the station manager, the reporting phone call had bounced around the chain of command until it landed in Alan's lap. He was the closest man they had, and apparently the only one they could get in touch with. A situation like this meant no heat at the very least, and possibly a deadly, flammable gas leak at the station. If the men stationed there couldn't be radioed, well, Alan thought they should have called the cops. But no, of course they wouldn't, and like every other day, all the responsibility would be placed on him. Alan had to go, and so he was yanked out of his bed and into his car in the freezing hours of the morning to drive a few miles out and check up on the situation. Clank! The Volvo bounced, and the loose bumper that had been duct taped not 2 days prior had banged against the asphalt. Alan didn't seem to notice. He was busy trying to concentrate on the road. His exit would be coming up, and there was no way Alan would let himself add any extra time to the whole ordeal. No, he just needed to concentrate on the road, its white lines reflecting back at him beneath the soft glow of his headlights, each of them emerging out of the swollen darkness and just as quickly sliding out of view beneath the chassis of the car, each passing line replaced by another. Yes, he needed to focus on the road, not the quiet thumping of the bumper bouncing against the car seemingly in unison with the swooshing of the lines beneath him, or the soft scrapes of the wipers wiping away in their unique lopsided rhythm, the flakes of fluffy snow that looked so much like the pillows Alan had left at home drifting down, 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 out from the void of sky, so cosmically black that without the snow to freckle its face, Alan might not have known if his eyes were open or not. No, he could not focus on these whispered things, with their rising and falling like ocean waves, repeating so predictably, rhythmically, hypnotically. Alan suddenly shook his head and blinked furiously. Just another mile or two. Never so much had Alan wanted a working stereo, anything to distract from the lulling duet that the road and his car were singing to each other right now. He needed desperately for some obnoxious DJ to interrupt their crooning lullaby, just anything to break the monotonous droning that seemed to be connected directly to his eyelids. Alan took another deep puff of his cigarette and reached down, groping around for his travel thermos. Coffee was what he needed, and although he most definitely hadn't prepared enough for this ordeal, it was all he had. His fingers fumbled about. Where the hell did it go? He turned his gaze from the road for a second. The thermos was not in the cup holder where he'd left it. His eyes flicked back to the road as his hand crept down to the passenger seat floor, feeling blindly against old wrappers and plastic bags for what surely would have been the distinct cylindrical form of his thermos. His eyes flicked down again, but no, it was not there. Maybe that bump I hit. He craned his arm awkwardly behind the seat, pawing like a bear for honey down against the back seat floor. Surely it'd be there. Amongst empty McDonald's fries containers and flip-flops he'd thrown back there after a beach day so many months ago, it had to be there. but his seatbelt was wrapped around him like some strangling python, holding his little fingers back from sufficiently searching. Alan clicked his belt loose and turned his head, letting his gaze slide off the road to stare at the mess of his back seat. And there it was, rolling with the sway of the car off on the far right of the floor, his little plaid thermos. With a great big stretch and slight acceleration on the gas, Alan reached out his arm as far as it would go, grasping for it, but it was just short. So with a little push, Alan sprung out a bit, revving the engine with his foot as he did, and looped his finger through the handle to pull it with him into the front seat. Alan sighed, returning his gaze to the road. What a little triumph, he thought, unscrewing the thermos lid. A nuisance, but a triumph nonetheless, for he might as well have just stolen ambrosia. With just a lift of the cap, the liquid gold that he'd held before him suddenly filled the Volvo with such deep, earthy aromas that came waltzing out of the thermos in great billows of volcanic steam and into his nostrils. The scent alone had woken him up. Alan didn't dare touch his lips to the nectar's molten surface yet, no. He just sat there, one arm on the wheel, cigarette in hand, and the other holding the thermos just below his nose to take in deep wafts of the clank. The Volvo had hurled over another bump, bouncing the bumper against the road again, but more importantly, with some force, splashing Alan with a face full of searing coffee. His eyes instinctively shut tight as his flesh seemingly lit aflame. This wasn't liquid gold, no, this was molten lead. Alan reached up screaming, dropping the thermos into his lap, emptying the boiling contents directly onto his crotch. He flailed about, swerving and stomping, trying to get it off him, abandoning all control of the Volvo across the icy highway. Through all this caustic, blistering pain erupted a new, concentrated burn on Alan's thigh as his dropped cigarette burned a hole through his sweatpants. He was screaming and sliding all about, eyes melting in their sockets, until the duet came to a stop. Alan felt himself spinning, and then with a rolling lurch came the sound of shattering glass against his head. He was suddenly as weightless as he was in his dreams, for just a moment, before, like the shouting of his boss's voice over the answering machine, he was slammed into the icy ground, sliding as he did. And amongst a blanket of snow, Alan was asleep once again.